Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, we're going to be doing the next episode of the Divine Economy Theory series. This is More Than Laissez-Faire. This is the book about macroeconomics, and we're in chapter 2. We're going to be talking about the divine economy model, and we're going to be doing 3 different sections, and these 3 are the sections that we'll be doing today. So thank you for coming. I'm grateful that you're here. You're going to spend some time with me today looking at the divine economy model. And one thing I wanted to make sure you felt comfortable with is when you come, if this is a Facebook Live, so there's a chat box. You can put your where you live, if you would like, or what it is that interests you about economics, what it is that interests you about the divine economy theory. And so that's what we're going to do today. I want to welcome you to this divine economy theory fireside, and to thank you for taking your time to be here with me. This Facebook Live series serves as an audiobook. Every once in a while, I'll host a mini webinar to talk in more depth about the diagrams or any general questions that come up during the audiobook episodes. This Facebook Live series also serves as an archival resource, since I am the author and originator of the divine economy theory, and I'm the one reading the book. And finally, this Facebook Live series is a love story. It is a story about the love of the divine economy theory, the love of freedom, the love of peace and prosperity, and the love of voluntary social cooperation. Well, let's get started. Today's fireside is Chapter 2. The title of that chapter is Divine Economy Model. And we're going to be looking at 3 sections: the 3-dimensional model, the 4th dimension, and the 5th dimension. I believe that you'll find this abstract model building experience very interesting. Once we get started, after each paragraph, I will ask for your comments. Let's see who's here. Okay, so nobody's here yet. That's fine. See how this works. I got this confused every time. Okay, there we go. So when you are at the Facebook Live, you'll see some links, and those links take you to places that might be useful to you. So let's go look at those. What you find here is that there's a link that will take you to Amazon, where you can look at the More Than Laissez-Faire book. There's a link that will notify you when I go live on Facebook Live. It'll send you an email. And then there's also a link that will take you to a free PDF that is a workbook that accompanies this book. Basically, it has all the diagrams in it, and you can do whatever you like on those pages to help you understand the diagrams. And then also there's on this Facebook Live page, you'll find a couple emails, addresses that you can send me any questions you have or comments. we can stay in touch that way, in addition to using the chat box. So we're finished with that, and we're going to now take the next step, which is to go into the audiobook. But before we do that, I want you to look at this diagram. Okay, so this is the diagram which is the highest form of the two-dimensional model. And we reached this point at the last audiobook episode. So it'll take a minute for you to kind of digest this, even if you were there for that episode. But this is we went step by step to get to this point. It's called the modus operandi of the divine economy. And so we're going to be starting at that point in a minute. And I want you to just think about what you're seeing here, reflect on it. It might be different from what you know, or it might be a reminder of what you learned. But anyways, that's where we're going to be starting in a second. So take a look at it. Before we go there, though, I want to come back and speak with you, and I want to make sure that you feel comfortable. I'm doing my best to make this enjoyable for you. So please, when you come, give your comments. Tell us where you're from, why you're interested in economics, what you find interesting about the divine economy theory. Oh, I always take a sip from my Ludwig von Mises Institute mug here. Before we get started, and so we're going to look at where we are right now. Is we're going to be looking at the three-dimensional model. That's where this this audiobook will pick up right there. The three-dimensional model. The next modification of the divine economy model stretches the imagination a little by adding a depth dimension, the third dimension in this model. This can be grasped fairly easily by imagining the modus operandi of the divine economy model given in diagram 2C as submerged in a bowl of water. The water that surrounds and supports the model represents latent and active entrepreneurship. See diagram 2E. So this is a little different from what you just were looking at on modus operandi, because we now have submerged it, and now we have this latent and active entrepreneurship as part of that model. This is now the third dimension. So if you'll think about that for a minute, we'll see if there's see who's here, if there's any comments. Nobody's here, so we'll go on then. So these are the highlights for that paragraph. For the section is called the three-dimensional model, and it's going to stretch your imagination a little by adding a depth dimension. So we took diagram 2C, which I was showing you earlier, and submerged it in a bowl of water. And that water that surrounds and supports the model represents latent and active entrepreneurship. So here's that diagram again, and it's indicating that entrepreneurship is the driving force of the divine economy. And so you see this third dimension is where it's submerged, and this model is submerged, and we have latent and active entrepreneurship all around it. So we will go now to the next paragraph. Uh-oh. I didn't show that to you. Darn it. Okay, so I made a mistake. We'll go back. This was not where we wanted to be. Okay. So I was showing you, this was highlighted. Three-dimensional model. I have to keep checking back on that, make sure I'm on the right page. Okay. The three-dimensional model, and it stretches the imagination a little by adding a depth dimension. And that diagram 2C that I was showing you is submerged in a bowl of water, and that water that surrounds and supports the model represents latent and active entrepreneurship. As you can see in this diagram, which is diagram 2E, it says that label of that diagram is that entrepreneurship is the driving force of the divine economy. And so this submersion into this bowl of water represents latent and active entrepreneurship that this model is now within. So now go to the next paragraph. When entrepreneurship is late, wait, no, I'm at the wrong place. Darn it, I get that. Entrepreneurship is alertness to one's surroundings and the knowledge therein. This is nearly perfectly represented by the submersion analogy. The water is what surrounds, and submersion into the water introduces entrepreneurship. So one's surroundings. The water is what surrounds one's surroundings, and submission into the water introduces entrepreneurship. In this entrepreneurial condition, all that is within, the knowledge therein, potentially comes to light. So the highlights for this paragraph is that entrepreneurship is alertness to one's surroundings and the knowledge therein. And so the knowledge therein potentially comes to light when within this latent and active entrepreneurship. It's this entrepreneurial condition that enables that to happen. I'm fumbling around here, I apologize. So let's see who's here, if anybody's back at the Facebook Live page. So nobody's here yet. Okay, so I believe we're going to just go on to the next one then. Next paragraph. Okay. When entrepreneurship is in the latent state, the divine economy and its components are in potential only. When alertness triggers a response, the result is active entrepreneurship. which significantly is the driving force in the economy. So when entrepreneurship is in its latent state, these are the highlights for that paragraph. All the components of the divine economy are in potential only. But when there's this alertness that takes place as part of entrepreneurship, it triggers active entrepreneurship. And that is what is the driving force of the economy. If I am in a latent state of entrepreneurship, I may simply buy a product that I like. Or I may begin to actively perceive opportunities and compare and contrast to see what other products are out there to buy or sell. Additionally, I may look at the time horizon. I may weigh the various possibilities and decide to save so that I can buy a tractor because of the prospect of improved production, for example. So the highlights for this paragraph are that I could be latent, or I could start to become an active entrepreneur by comparing and contrasting, and then also looking at the time horizon, deciding to save so I can do something that would increase production. Let's see if anybody's here. I don't see anyone here yet. Okay, so we're ready to go back to the next paragraph. As an active entrepreneur, I may discover discrepancies in the market that lead to inefficiencies, and I may take steps to remedy the situation. When in a latent state, the water merely holds within it the divine economy. But when there is active entrepreneurship, energy is released, which charges all the elements in the water. So when there is active entrepreneurship, there's the discrepancies in the market are discovered, and steps are taken to remedy whatever situation there is. And when that happens, energy is released, which charges all the elements in the water. The entire model is charged by that. So I think we're going to look at the next section, which is the fourth dimension. And so to put it into perspective, chapter 2, where we looked at the third dimension, which was submerging the model into water, finding this latent and active entrepreneurship. And now we're going to look at the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension of the divine economy model enters into the picture by identifying its poles. The divine economy has many components, just like the complex system of the planet Earth, which has numerous components such as the water cycle, the ocean currents, the atmospheric forces, geothermal forces, and absorption of solar radiation, to name a few. The Earth also can be understood more fully by examining these factors, as they are influenced by rotation around its poles, So the highlights for this section is we're looking at the fourth dimension, and how that is introduced into the model is the identifying its poles. And the analogy is the complex system of the planet Earth, which has all of these forces taking place in and around the planet, and how those are influenced by the rotation, how examining these factors as they are influenced by the rotation around its poles. That way you can it can be more fully understood. And so that's what we're going to do with the divine economy model. Let's see who's here, if anybody's come. I'm looking here, I don't really see any comments. So we can go back and look at the next paragraph. Similarly, the divine economy can be more fully understood when the model includes the poles of unity and justice. And that's seen in diagram 2F. It is around these two poles that the divine economy revolves. The axis of these poles represents the nature and role of knowledge. The implication here, with this axis being centrally located within the model, is that knowledge flows throughout, and that it is this free-flowing knowledge that best serves all of the divine economy processes. So we're going to look at these are the highlights for that paragraph. We're going to be paying attention to the poles of unity and justice. And the axis of these poles represents the nature and role of knowledge. And this axis is centrally located within the model, and that indicates and is representative that the knowledge flows throughout, and that it is the free-flowing knowledge that best serves all of the divine economy processes. So you see this spinning and centrally located and dispersing this knowledge. And so that is the fourth dimension of the model, by adding this axis showing the nature and role of knowledge. And what that enables us to achieve is to get to what is called the complete divine economy model, independent of time. So this is a snapshot of the divine economy. Even though visually, these little things that's spinning around infinitely fast and knowledge is flowing, it still is, and which indicates that it's dynamic. It's still independent of time. So it's actually a static model, even though it has that dynamic nature to it. Just by looking at it, you can see how dynamic it is. Okay, let's see if anybody's here. We'll go back, take a look. I don't don't see anyone here. Okay. So we can go back to the, whoopsie. We can go back to the, let's see, where am I going here? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to now go to the next paragraph. This is a key concept in the divine economy theory. It is the nature and role of knowledge that enables the equilibrium forces to maintain balance and harmony. Intervention by those with finite human understanding strikes at the nature and role of knowledge axis, with the consequences being a condition of imbalance and disharmony and a corruption of the divine economy. So this is a key concept in the divine economy theory. This nature and role of knowledge axis here enables equilibrium forces to maintain balance and harmony. Intervention strikes at the nature and role of knowledge axis. And the consequences is an imbalance and disharmony and corruption of the divine economy. To clarify the importance of justice, because we're talking about these two poles, unity and justice. To clarify the importance of justice, it is justice that inextricably links the interests of the individual and those of society. Justice also implies non-violence and non-coercion. Oh, so did I? Yeah. So we want to talk about the highlight for this paragraph is we want to talk about the importance of justice. And here's what justice does. It links the interests of the individual and those of society. Elaborating on the pole of unity, the pole of unity shines with prosperity for all. There is now an awareness of the historical and scientific knowledge that shows all humanity as one people. As far back as A.D. 1573, Bartolome de Albornoz wrote, "Buying and selling is the nerve of human life that sustains the universe. By means of buying and selling, the world is united, joining distant lands and nations, people of different languages, laws, and ways of life." So now we're going to address that other pole, the pole of unity. It shines with prosperity for all. By means of buying and selling, the world is united, joining distant lands and nations, people of different languages, laws, and ways of life. Let's see if anybody's joined us yet. I don't see any comments, so if they're here, they're not making comments. Okay. So what's happening now is we're about to go to the fifth dimension. I want to remind you of the sequence of steps we've taken. So we started off with the highest form of the two-dimensional model. That's what we covered up to last time. So then we went in and we looked at the third-dimensional model, three-dimensional model. Then we looked at the fourth dimension, and now we're about to look at the fifth dimension of the divine economy model. The fifth dimension of the divine economy model brings in the realism of time, since there is no realism to any economic model that is static. The dynamism of all of the elements of the model comes to life as changes take place over time, and that's shown in diagram 2G, which is this here. So we're moving in time. So the divine economy model moves along in time, and that is the complete divine economy model over time. So the highlights for that, for where we are now, is we're looking at the fifth dimension, and it brings in the realism of time, since there is no realism to any economic model that's static. And so the dynamism of all the elements in that model, they're all dynamic within themselves, but over time, that's what when it shows those changes that take place over time, that's what makes it a dynamic model rather than a static model. And so what you'll see here is, see all these elements, they're all happening constantly within their own little circle, yet they're also contributing. It's all interactive. Everything's, when that changes, that changes. When that changes, that changes. So there's always happening like that. And that's what's happening all the time. And then not only that, it's doing that over time. So that's the dynamic nature of the five-dimensional model. Now that the complete model of the divine economy is defined, we are ready to examine economic production. The divine economy model is conducive to the graphical and conceptual exploration of production possibility frontiers, as you will find out in the next chapter. So our journey is just beginning, because now that we have a model, we can actually put it to use and understand all the economic concepts out there with the model that we have in hand. So the divine economy model is conducive to the graphical and conceptual exploration of production possibilities frontiers. That's going to be where we go next, but we'll just continue to hit those economic concepts and put the model into place and look at it, and it'll show you things in ways that you've never seen before. Just like this model is something you've never seen before, and you'll understand everything more as a result. So what I want you to think about now, we're going to, I keep forgetting to use this little slide here. After each paragraph, you could reflect on what you've learned. And so now I'm kind of dumping a load on you, because I'm asking you to reflect on the third dimension, the fourth dimension, and the fifth dimension, and the model as a whole from its very beginning. And because right now we're about to look at the questions that appear at the end of chapter 2, and so I want to look at those with you. So what is it that convinces you that the divine economy model is subjective? So there it is. That's the complete divine economy model, and it looks at it actually over time. What is it about that model that convinces you it's a subjective model? And so then the next question, also from what you've learned about the divine economy model, explain how all of the elements in the divine economy model are affected by the equilibrium forces. So all these elements, how are they being affected by the equilibrium forces? How are they interacting with each other? How's all this changing and moving and responding? Explain how all the elements in the divine economy model are affected by the equilibrium forces. So we're back at the Facebook Live page, looking for any comments. Oh, here's a comment. Okay, Kathy, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll have some questions. She says, I am watching. I am a Baha'i, and am interested in other Baha'is' versions of the economy that works, but I have no background in economics, and the theory is difficult for me to follow. Yes. Well, that's why I'm doing the audiobooks, to help out with that. I think a person would need to, in my opinion, buy the book, the ebook or the book, and spend time looking through it and reading it and understanding it. The audiobook goes through every paragraph, looks and explains things. You could look at the audiobook recordings, and if you could, back them up and replay it as much as you need to get a feel for what's the content of each paragraph is. I can't help beyond that, other than the personal contact, but I mean, the information is there. I explain each paragraph. I try to give my insight into each one, and like I said, since it's recorded, you can forward and backward and forward and backward, and until that concept is clear to you. But it's not something that you're just going to. First of all, there's a lot of visualization in this theory because of the models, and that should help also. But it's not something that you can grasp without thinking about it. You really have to spend time with that, and that's the purpose of the audiobooks, is to help people have that resource. And in addition to the book, in addition to the workbook, and I'm going to, like I said, I will answer specific questions to help a person understand things. To just explain it in a few words, it's not possible. But if you have a specific question, I can respond to that. And so I want to Again, I want to thank you, Kathy, for asking your question. I think hopefully you understand what I'm saying, is that it's not something that you can just in 1 second understand. You have to look at it. You have to dig deep, read, listen to the video, because it will answer your questions if you spend the time. And it's important because I think this theory will solve most of the problems that a person has with understanding economics. But you still have to put in the work. You have to understand how it works, and that's what I'm trying to provide with this audio book. So I hope that helps you. Okay, here's another comment by Kathy, so let's see what that says. Having the digital tools, such as the audiobook and going paragraph by paragraph, is helpful and allows us to stretch. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's what its purpose is. Yeah, and I mean, the only other alternative is sitting down with me, and that's not seemed to be possible for people to just always sit down with me and talk to me and ask questions and work through the book together. But that's what the audiobook enables us to do, and so that's going to be a good thing for everybody. And I really appreciate your feedback, Kathy. And it's a long journey. This is the first book in a series of 4 books, and this is just actually the model that everything stems from. So it's important to understand this at the beginning, but I don't think you need to be hung up too much on the details. If you look at the model and understand how dynamic it is, and the potency of all the elements in it, that's sufficient, because we're going to move on. We're going to go into much more detail. We're going to see how it applies, and so it will. Like I said, I think if you. So a minute ago, I was saying you needed to really look at it step by step and understand it all, and that's true. But at the same time, you can actually, if at some point there's going to be a little epiphany go off, a little spark go off in your mind. It said, I kind of understand what this model is, what it represents, and that it's holistic, and that it contains all the information about the economy in a simple diagram. Okay, not so simple diagram as you get more and more into it, but starting off as a very simple diagram and getting more and more complex. But even the very complex one that we looked at, where it was, I'll show you which one we're talking about. Whoopsie. This one here, even that one there, when you're looking at it, once you've kind of got familiar with each of these little segments and what, we're going to go, earlier on, as I developed this model from the beginning, which was last episode, we talked about each of these elements. And then this episode, we talked about the third, the fourth, and the fifth dimension. But the two-dimensional model and getting it to its highest form, we talked about all these elements. So they were defined, and they were defined relative to each other. So I think just understanding that content for the chapter 2, which is talking about this model, and then just stepping back, like right now I'm sitting 2 feet from this diagram, but looking at it and seeing, okay, that is the economy. That is the economy over time. Okay, and then we're going to start looking at how that works in the world, works in our world. And so, but anyway, so the point that I'm making is, yeah, it's complex. You have to understand all the details and stuff. But at the same time, at some point, you can step back and say, with confidence, I kind of know what it is, and so I can move on. I have that in my mind. I see how interactive, how dynamic it is, how transformative it is, how much it's related to me as a human being, and how it connects me with other people, and how it all works. That's kind of what where you get to with this diagram. And then we move on, and then we start to see how it, more specifically, how it works. So I'm going to now go back to, let's see, go back to Facebook Live, see if Kathy, okay, there we go. Kathy, another comment. I'm most interested in how the model reflects the principles of the faith and how the model can be applied in practical terms. I just saw your post this AM in one of the Baha'i Facebook groups, so I go back and find the previous episodes. Okay, yeah. So this is broader. This is science, and science is in harmony with religion. So no matter what faith a person has, they should be able to connect to this model, this theory, because it's a scientific theory that's compatible with faith, and so I think you'll be able to do that when you juxtapose the two and think and reflect. I think you'll appreciate. I think you'll grow in understanding both of your faith and your belief, your understanding of economics. I believe that's the case because anytime you reflect on things, you gain more knowledge. And so I think this will be a very interesting experience in both of those realms of your understanding and you're seeking to understand. I know for me that's been the case when I think about science or religion. I benefit from knowing the divine economy theory. I definitely do, and I think others will too. So thank you very much for your question, Kathy. So what we're going to do now is go back to the agenda. So here is the goal. Our goal is to apply economics to our lives right now. So based on your reflections that you've had through each of these paragraphs, I've tried to help with those with the highlighting of certain points. Based on your reflections, the ones that you've had as a result of listening to this audiobook, think about some action that you can take. It's all about transformation. The goal is to use this knowledge of economics to transform the world around you. So wherever you are, whether you're at the beginning of your understanding of economics or you have a vast amount of knowledge of economics, but if that's the case, you're still new to this because this is brand new. But it will stimulate your thoughts no matter where you're coming from, And that should be able to be translated into action. You should find that transformation enjoyable, and it should help you make the world a better place. And that's the purpose of the divine economy theory. And that's the purpose of this audiobook that we're going through. The first book, which is More Than Laissez-Faire, which is the macroeconomics book. Anyways, like it said at the end of chapter 2, we're about to go into a new chapter, and that one we're going to look at production possibilities frontiers. And we'll be doing that with our new knowledge that we've gained from the chapter 2, which is the divine economy model. And so I'm going to sign out here in a second, but before I do, I want to come to you in person and thank you for coming. Thank you for, whether you're here live or whether you come back later and listen to the recording, I want to thank you. I hope that I'm doing you a service, and I'm grateful for your interest. So until the next time, which will probably be about a week from now, when I do the next Facebook Live on production possibilities frontiers, within the umbrella, under the umbrella of the divine economy theory. I will see you then.